It's my nerd world. Welcome to it, a space opera podcast. I'm glad you're with the show this week. Here is what we have in store for you today. Dune trailer and Raised by Wolves reviews. I've watched both in the first 3 episodes of Raised by Wolves. I'll give you my thoughts on the Dune trailer and the new HBO Max show. A little bit of a teaser on that. I'm actually really enjoying it. It is quite thought-provoking. Your rewatch this week is Star Trek Into Darkness. Plus, we do have some listener feedback to get to, all on a space opera podcast. This week's show is brought to you by Zone. 1 million users united with one mission: to take back social media. And with your help, Zone will take billions from today's social media giants and give it back to you, the users. Now, look, I'm concerned about the increasing amount of censorship coming from social media companies, and that's why I personally am part of Zone, a brand new social media outlet that's launching in October. So it's revolutionary because it's a better all-in-one social media alternative. This eliminates the need for the social media giants. With one profile, you're able to create multiple zones using different avatars that suit your online persona needs. You can become a Zone ambassador. It's free for a limited time, and you'll get increased influence as well as a variety of other advantages. And again, Zone is all user-owned. Zones claimed first will have more influence, and anyone can invest to own more of the Zone platform. Again, Zone launches in October, so join me and claim your Zone today at ourzone.zone. That's O-U-R zone.zone. Now, on with the show.
My Nerd World.
It is My Nerd World on a space opera podcast, and I am your host, Jon Justice. And this is the show where we talk all things space opera, the genre, TV, books, and movies, and your listener feedback. You can always email TalkShowNerd@gmail.com, and of course, go to mynerdworld.net. Almost daily blogs are being written at mynerdworld.net. Been really, really busy this week. There's been a lot going on. Took a trip down memory lane to the first movie theater I ever went to, the first movie I ever saw. I actually found an image of that movie theater in Rosemead, California, the Rosemead 4 Cinema, where I saw Star Wars for the first time, and that'll be a bit of a topic coming up on this week's Star Wars podcast. That'll be released a little bit later this weekend. So if you go to mynerdworld.net and you go to the My Nerd blog, you can check out those blogs. Plus, a lot of controversy around Star Wars. Daisy Ridley and Josh Gad did a sit-down interview where Daisy talked at length about the ever-changing parentage in the Star Wars sequel trilogy. So again, we'll be covering that at length in the Star Wars podcast. But this is a space opera podcast, a podcast devoted to the space opera genre, of which, of course, I write my EMBARK science fiction space opera novels there, and you can get more details there at mynerdworld.net, and I'll be talking a little bit more about that later on in the show. Your rewatch this week is going to be another J.J. Abrams movie, speaking of Star Wars, and that is Star Trek Into Darkness, a movie that I am a massive, massive fan of. It's one of the things about J.J. Abrams, for me personally, is that he just makes incredibly rewatchable films. And I found an article from Scott Mendelson, whom I'm not the biggest fan of, to be honest with you. He does a lot of movie reviews and pop culture commentary. I don't agree with a lot of what he has to say, but he does spark some really interesting talking points and brings about a lot of interesting questions. I found a recent interview from June of this year of why he argues that Star Trek Into Darkness succeeded where Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker failed. Now, I completely disagree because I adore The Rise of Skywalker, and it's going to be one of the focus topics on this week's Star Wars podcast. But he makes some very interesting points about Star Trek Into Darkness that I want to share with you. So I did some heavy editing to strip out a lot of his negativity that I simply, again, don't agree with. But he does provide some insight that I can share with you a little bit later on in the show today. And Star Trek Into Darkness, again, it's one of those J.J. Abrams films that it's a great ride and incredibly rewatchable in my opinion. and doesn't get old for me, and it's one of those movies that I have a hard time stepping away from that's not Star Wars, because I don't want to miss any scenes in the film. So we'll be doing that a little bit later on in the show, but let's start here. I want to talk about two recent pieces of space opera content. One of them isn't falling quite into the space opera genre, but it's close enough, and we started talking about that last week, and that's Raised by Wolves. So before I get into the first 3 episodes and my thoughts on Raised by Wolves, I want to talk about something that is definitely a space opera, and that is the latest attempt to make a big screen version of the Frank Herbert novel Dune. This is done by Denis Villeneuve, who I'm a big fan of. Did Sicario, Arrival, Blade Runner 2049, which is just a fantastic, masterful piece of filmmaking. The Dune trailer dropped this week. I have the audio for it here, and then I'm going to share with you what was my instinctive reaction to the official Dune trailer. But here's the audio for Dune by Denis Villeneuve.
There's something happening to me. There's something awakening in my mind. I can't control it.
What did you see?
There's a crusade coming.
Do you often dream things that happen just as you dreamed them?
Yes.
The test is simple. Remove your hand from the box, and you die.
What's in the box?
Pain. You inherit too much power. You have proven you can rule yourself. Now you must learn to rule others. Something none of your ancestors learned.
My father rules an entire planet.
He's losing it.
He's getting a richer one.
He'll lose that one too. Arrakis is a death trap.
I'll kill him. This is an extermination. They're picking my family off one by one.
Let's fight like demons.
An animal caught in a trap will gnaw off its own leg to escape. What will you do?
I know you.
One day, the legend will be born. All of civilization depends on it.
The future. I can see it. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer.
My Lord Duke.
Where the fear is gone, only I will remain.
Go, go, go!
Tell you what, I did not get goosebumps watching the Dune trailer the first time. I did just now listening to the Dune trailer for the first time. That's the first time I've actually just listened to the audio. The song that was played in there, and this seems to be the trend as of late, is a somewhat slowed down, might even be a cover version, of Pink Floyd's Eclipse. Look, I really enjoyed the trailer, and I'm going to get into to some specifics here with regard to the filmmaking and some comments from Denis Villeneuve. But I really did enjoy the trailer. It didn't grab me on an emotional level because I'll be completely honest with you, I have not read Dune. It is on a list of things to read, And as an individual who's writing science fiction and space opera, I imagine that if there's any other authors out there that write in space opera who are listening to me say that I have not read Dune, they're probably shaking their head right now, but I have not read Dune. I've watched the David Lynch version of the film in various shapes and forms, but never all the way through to the from beginning to end. It's on HBO Max right now, with Raised by Wolves, which I'll be talking about here in just a moment. And I actually sat down to start watching it the other day. I had seen a trailer for it, and it's kind of seen further visuals and parts of the film I hadn't watched before. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and sit down and give this a shot. There was a point when I turned it off, and I might revisit it. It plays out super slow and not in a compelling way. The effects do not age well in the David Lynch version of Dune, and it wasn't all that well received when it first came out, and I can understand why. So I'm going to wait now to have my first experience with the entire story of Dune when this movie comes out in December. That's what I've decided, because I've got an opportunity here personally for me, while I don't mind spoilers, and I talk about that quite often on my other shows, because I really do like the build-up, especially when it comes to Star Wars, more specifically for Star Wars. I don't mind getting into spoilers when it comes to Star Wars, because half of the fun when it comes to a Star Wars movie, at least for the Skywalker saga films, was that lead-up and speculation and hearing the rumors and the leaks and all that. I know that I'm ruining that first experience of seeing a Star Wars movie, going in blind, but I still get a tremendous amount of enjoyment reading all those leaks and rumors. I'm not going to do that with Dune. I know a bit of the storyline, and I'll share it with you here in a moment. But I'm going to go in blind because I really want to see Denis Villeneuve's vision for this film, because I really just respect him as a content creator and a director. So jumping ahead a bit, friend of the show, Edwin Lowe from The Lowdown Show, who's had me on a show a couple of times. You can find it up on YouTube, L-O, The Lowdown Show, L-O Down Show. He had emailed me for the Space Opera Podcast this week and says, what do you think about the Dune trailer? What is Dune? I'm not familiar with it. Are you? Look, I really liked the trailer. It looks absolutely beautiful. I'm incredibly compelled by it. It was a little less colorful than I had imagined. I guess I had Denis Villeneuve's Blade Runner 2049 kind of in my head, since that's the last movie of his that I have, what's the last movie he's made? And that is, basically a cyberpunk film and the color palette in Blade Runner 2049 is absolutely incredible. Dune being Dune, it was basically a wash in tans and browns. That being said, it looks amazing. It really does. And I imagine for an individual who's actually read Dune, that the trailer carried a heck of a lot more significance, seeing that they're watching scenes that they know of from the book play out on the screen. So for those that are not familiar with Dune, it is set in the distant future amidst a feudal interstellar society in which various noble houses control planetary fiefs. Dune tells the story of a young Paul Atreides whose family escapes the stewardship of the planet Arrakis, while the planet is an inhospitable and sparsely populated desert wasteland. It is the only source of the melange, or the spice, a drug that extends life and enhances mental abilities. The spice is also necessary for space navigation, which requires a kind of multi-dimensional awareness and foresight that only the drug provides. As the spice can only be produced on Arrakis, control of the planet is thus a coveted and dangerous undertaking. The story explores the multi-layered interactions of politics, religion, ecology, technology, human emotion, and the factions of the Empire, as the factions of the Empire confront each other in a struggle for the control of Arrakis and its spice. This is one of these. You read that plot and you go, "What?" That's daunting, and just from the angle of being an author myself, which I use that term lightly, but from the angle of being an author myself, putting together a book that is that dense and rich with mythology, I've got nothing but the utmost respect for. And it has to be done right. It reminds me quite a bit in sort of modern storytelling of what we got from a visual standpoint in a show like, say, Game of Thrones. And I would actually argue, and I've seen people mention this, that Dune very much has this sort of Game of Thrones-esque layer set in a space opera environment. I have an article here from Gizmodo, which I thought was interesting that I wanted to share with you about Denis Villeneuve. When he was asked to direct the adaptation of Frank Herbert's Dune, he had two requirements. One was that he wanted to divide the book into two movies, which he's done, and the other is that he wanted it to be as real as possible. He said, "I strongly believe that as human beings, what is around us has an impact on inspiration. The other condition that I had was to shoot the movie was that I wanted to shoot in a real desert. My argument was they didn't shoot Jaws in a swimming pool." The title is Dune. It needed to be a real environment, so we would be inspired by the infinity and the impact of those landscapes on the actors, on the actors' inspiration and myself too, he said. When you are pushing on the camera button, you need the chaos of life. You need to recreate life in front of the camera in order to document reality, and most importantly, you need nature. Dune is about an ecosystem at its very core, he continued. What I did learn about Dune is the exploration of the life and the ecosystem and the ecosystem and the biosphere and all the science that Frank Herbert put behind that is so beautiful. It's so poetic. I think that in order to bring Dune to the screen, I had to be as close to nature as possible to make Dune as close to us as possible. So when people see the movie, they will be amazed by the power of the landscape, and more importantly, they will feel strangely at home. And look, man, this is one of the reasons I love content creators, and I love individuals that have their own ideas on what is going to make something good and different. I have so much respect for that. I was listening to an interview from 2016. There's a band that I've only found over the past couple of months. It's a band called Gunship, and they are actually a part of a musical genre that I was unaware of, but oddly enough, a big fan of. Growing up, in the 80s and 90s, as a massive Depeche Mode fan, as I say with Star Wars, I was a fan of Star Wars before I was a fan of anything else. I was a fan of Depeche Mode before I was a fan of any other band, and I was a fan of NASCAR before I got into any other sports, sort of deeply. And I never got into any other sports deeply other than NASCAR. I love electronic-based music, and there is a new subgenre of electronic music called synthwave. Okay, so why am I bringing this up? I'm bringing this up because there was an interview that I found with the band Gunship that I found recently on a synthwave podcast. And in that interview, one of the three members of the band talked about how when it came to song making, most musicians would say that any song worth a lick, you can play on a guitar with a hook, right? If a song is good, it sounds good with an acoustic guitar. And he said that he actually operates differently. He finds a mood or a sound and then builds a song off of that to make like a landscape. He sees it as being very cinematic. And with Gunship, their approach to music making is very cinematic. Synth-based, 80s sounding, but they create visuals to go along with almost every single project that they do. And I dig that. And getting back to Denis Villeneuve, I love the fact that he had this thought in his head that, like, look, this is a space opera, but I want it to feel as real as possible when it comes to the elements of being on, the planet Dune, for crying out loud. There was something similar done with The Rise of Skywalker, which, again, is going to be somewhat the focal point of the Star Wars podcast this week. But when they shot the desert Pisana sequence, when they're on the stolen skiffs being chased by the First Order on the tread speeders. I love that sequence. They actually had those skiffs built. Okay, the actors were on them. They were on gimbals that could turn, and they actually took those gimbals to, I believe it was Jordan. It might have been Wadi Rumi. Anyways, they took them to a desert. I believe it was in Jordan. And they put green screens around them, but they actually had those gimbals the actors on those skiffs there in the desert. And the whole point of what they said, the reason why they did that was because they wanted the natural sunlight of being in the desert, along the same lines of what Denis Villeneuve wanted to do with Dune. I can't wait to see what his vision is going to be for this movie. And he adores the source subject. He's mentioned this often, that it was a big inspiration for why he ended up becoming a filmmaker. I'll give you one more quote from this article from Gizmodo. It's pretty interesting. A couple of here. Oscar Isaac, who plays Paul's father, Duke Leto Atreides, chimed in with his thoughts about the scale of production. In short, he says, it competes with Star Wars, but pales in comparison to something else. Or should I say, someone. He says, I'll just to say that, no set piece, no X-Wing, no Millennium Falcon could compare to the sheer scale of Josh Brolin's head. That just made me laugh. It was massive, both literally and figuratively, and it really made me feel like I was on an alien planet. That quote made me laugh. It plays better. I should have grabbed the audio. It plays better with the audio. The article goes on to say, there's one other big reason why Villeneuve wanted to film Dune on location, to get to the heart of the film's environmental message, he said. Herbert's original novel features themes of conservation and exploitation, but the director is taking it one step further to comment on modern issues of climate change. He said the story of freemen adapting the needs of their planet in order to survive is something that we should be taking to heart, not just because we might save our planet, but because eventually we won't have any choice. Look, I don't get into that. I just don't. I'm 48 years old. I've been through the education system, and I've been around long enough to know that every sort of generation has its global catastrophe pending, whether it's an ice age, whether it's Aquanet and the ozone, or whether now it's climate change. So that's about as political as I'm going to get. We're going to move on. So, in short, I'm super excited for Dune. I was excited for Dune before even seeing a trailer. I would have been the first one in line on opening night, even if I hadn't seen a trailer, just because I know how important Dune is to so many people, and because of the individual who is directing it, I am just a massive, massive fan of.
My Nerd World.
All right, some quick comments on Raised by Wolves, the HBO special. Ridley Scott, the famous director, another one of my favorite directors, is the individual behind this, directed the first 2 episodes. It was pretty apparent he didn't direct the third. Doesn't mean that I didn't enjoy the 3rd episode of Raised by Wolves any less because Ridley Scott didn't direct it, but it was clear that it didn't have his artistic touch on that 3rd episode. So, going to be watching the 4th episode tonight. They released the first 3 on HBO Max, and every Thursday they'll release another episode, which I'm really kind of glad that they're doing. They did the same thing with The Mandalorian of releasing it every week, and I like it being spaced out, especially if you're doing a podcast like mine where you want the opportunity to talk about something every week. I think that we're getting a little bit too used to having everything on demand instantly in our society, and it's nice to have that anticipation and talk about it a little bit. And Raised by Wolves is a show that you talk about. It's a challenging show. I don't want to get into too many spoilers. It does sort of fall into a bit of the space opera category. This is taking place after a massive war on Earth. Individuals are heading out into space, trying to find new places to go and set up and bring about life. About a couple of androids who give birth to human babies who they are supposed to raise, but unfortunately things don't go as planned. It is an incredibly challenging show, and that's why I'm digging it. A little more violent than I had expected. Not necessarily in a bad way, but just wasn't quite expecting it to be as violent as it ended up being. And it took a lot of twists and turns in those especially in that first episode, that I was not expecting. You have some religious elements to it. You have some political elements to it. But you also have, in Raised by Wolves, some challenging... How do I want to word it? It's challenging from a standpoint of, at the moment, there really isn't anybody to root for. The protagonists doing that thing with my fingers aren't falling into the sort of typical category of protagonists as you would expect, and where you have 2 different schools of thought, one being sort of an atheist, not a sort of, it is, an atheism school of thought, and then a religious higher power school of thought. The protagonists, separate from the atheists, weren't necessarily completely aligned with the religious element. So in the first 3 episodes, you're kind of presented with a challenging dynamic among the core characters of, all right, who are we going to root for here? It doesn't make for bad entertainment by any stretch. Certainly isn't the first time when you've walked into a movie or walked out of a film going, I really enjoyed that movie, but nobody was really right or wrong. Unforgiven with Clint Eastwood is probably one that sticks out in my mind the most as being a film of, well, you want to root for Clint Eastwood, but at the end of the day, he's not really all that good a dude either. So far, though, the show has not disappointed. I'm really enjoying it. It is very much in line with what Ridley Scott has been doing with science fiction, especially with Prometheus and Alien Covenant, 2 movies that I love. I love those films. I'm a big fan of the Alien franchise. While, some of those films are a little wonky, especially Alien Resurrection, the director's cut of Alien 3 is spectacular. Love Alien 1 and 2. I am a real big fan of Prometheus and of Alien Covenant, and that's largely due to the fact that they're kind of complicated films. They're not as easily as accessible as those other Alien movies were, and they are a bit challenging. And Raised by Wolves certainly does fall into that category as well, and I'm really looking forward to watching the next episode tonight. So what are your thoughts? Did you watch the Dune trailer? Have you read the book before? Am I missing out? Should I read the book before I go see the movie? Tell me something different. You watching Raised by Wolves? What are your thoughts on that? TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. Again, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com.
My Nerd World.
All right, let's get to the rewatch this week. And the rewatch this week for a space opera podcast is Star Trek Into Darkness. I know that this film got panned by a lot of Star Trek fans. I love Star Trek Into Darkness, and the one thing that Scott Mendelson, who penned the article that I have here in my hands, and I agree with, is that I actually think it's superior to the 2009 Star Trek that J.J. Abrams did, even though I very much like that movie too. The thing about these Star Trek films that I really enjoy is that they're almost Star Wars movies, especially that 2009 version, and J.J. Abrams said as much. And for me, and I'm going to put a hat tip to Brennan Marr, who had me on his show this week. Page Turners They Were Not. Really enjoyed my time talking about The Rise of Skywalker with him. But he had mentioned something a couple of months ago in an email responding to my Star Wars podcast, saying that he goes off of emotion and how a movie makes him feel. And I'm very much that same way as well. Sometimes you just want to get in the Millennium Falcon and take it for a ride. You don't need to break it apart piece by piece by piece. It's fun. I do that a lot. But at the end of the day, my enjoyment of a film and the rating and review that I give it is really going to be based on how did the movie make me feel? Was I entertained? And at what level was I entertained? Scott Mendelson gets into a little bit of nuance. I cut out a lot of the Rise of Skywalker stuff and stuck mostly to his commentary around Star Trek Into Darkness, which I'll share with you right now. He says this: both J.J. Abrams' sequels, because he directed Star Trek Into Darkness, attempted to revert to a prior status quo. But Star Trek Into Darkness attempted to demilitarize Star Trek, was more aspirational than Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker's retreat to conformity and generational nostalgia. Okay, I have some issues with that, but for the sake of the time and the show, we'll move on and just get to more of what Scott Mendelson had to say. The third Disney Star Wars episode played like a retroactive reassurance that the adult fans of A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi were still the most important Star Wars fans. I don't disagree with that. As such, The Rise of Skywalker makes for a fascinating double feature with another J.J. Abrams sci-fi sequel, Star Trek Into Darkness. And I haven't heard anybody make this comment before, but I'll make it here. And again, this is about Star Trek, not Star Wars. But that being said, I think it's one of the reasons why I love The Rise of Skywalker so much, is that it really does feel like Star Wars to me. More so than The Last Jedi, even though I think on a sort of filmmaking standpoint, The Last Jedi is a better directed film. It's a beautiful film. The Rise of Skywalker, when we're looking at pure Star Wars entertainment, what feels like Star Wars, from the story, the action, and definitely John Williams' score for The Rise of Skywalker, it feels absolutely 100% Star Wars to me. All right, back to Into Darkness. He goes on to say, I would argue that both Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker, and Star Trek both attempt to revert to a theoretically idealized status quo with their respective properties. I like Into Darkness, actually preferring it to the first Star Trek, writes Scott Mendelson. And that's partially because it feels like a battle between new blockbuster action Star Trek and the old exploration and discovery Star Trek. I'm also not too fond of the action climax, which mimics The Wrath of Khan and contains a sequence of mass destruction that puts Man of Steel to shame. I dig it. I think it's cool. But it can't completely negate a thoughtful parable for the desire to ramp up a blockbusterized popular franchise properties until they threaten to merely become just another mega-budget action fantasy tentpole. Star Trek flirted with Manifest Destiny, okay, with its Kirk should be captain just because storytelling. Star Trek Into Darkness puts his leadership to the test and offered evidence that he might deserve his command. The critical moment in the first act sees an angry and vengeful Kirk reverse course and disobey the orders of an increasingly militarized Starfleet to unilaterally execute mass murderer John Harrison / Khan. Instead, he attempts to capture the villain so he can stand trial, and in doing so, exposes a plot to push the Federation toward perpetual war over brokered peace. Of course, Khan's climactic act of crashing a starship into a crowded civilian populace, presumably killing thousands, negates that, but don't think too hard about the collateral damage. Star Trek Into Darkness is about a battle for the soul of the Star Trek property itself. Would the movies, in attempts to conquer global marketplaces and earn hundreds of millions of dollars, become just another, like a frankly number of films thus far, Wrath of Khan, First Contact, etc., kill the bad guy, save the world action franchise? Or would it pull itself from the brink and reassert its value as a science fiction adventure that prioritizes exploration and discovery over action, and might makes right heroics? Might makes right heroics. Get that inflection right. Since Into Darkness ends with Kirk's Enterprise getting that 5-year exploratory mission, it's not hard to see where the filmmaker stood on the matter. If Star Trek Into Darkness reads like a make Star Trek again action movie, then so too can The Rise of Skywalker be construed as, perhaps even more explicitly, give Star Wars back to Star Wars fans flick. Into Darkness's narrative and de-blockbusterizing Star Trek meant a return to the idealistic and aspirational stories about discovery and exploration. Rise of Skywalker was about centering the stars and fans of the original trilogy. He writes at the expense of the new cast and the younger fans who discovered Star Wars from the prequels, The Clone Wars, Rebels, or even Force Awakens. I completely disagree with that, but be that as it may, let's move on. Star Trek Into Darkness argues for progress, while The Rise of Skywalker argued for retreat. And again, I'm going to cast that aside because I completely disagree with that. Look, just because a movie happens to be entertaining doesn't mean that it's doing all the things that Scott Mendelson is saying. And ultimately, quit trying to be so existential. It's a wholly entertaining movie, right? Again, sometimes you just want to take the Millennium Falcon or the Starship Enterprise out for a spin. Now, he does bring up some good points, and I like the article from the standpoint and covered it on the show this week because I think that he broke down nicely some of the different elements of the film itself. That being said, it is a fantastically entertaining movie and definitely falls into that space opera genre and has the elements of why I love space operas so much. Look, I'm not a Trekkie by any stretch. I like space operas and science fiction. That's why I watch Star Trek movies. I love Star Wars and those other things. That's why I watch Star Wars movies. So when I go to watch a Star Trek movie, I'm just looking for good science fiction and space opera. And that's what I get in Star Trek Into Darkness. The action is fantastic when they end up going in disguise to Vulcan and they get chased down and we end up having John Harrison come to their rescue. All the space elements, the chase, heading back to Earth is fantastic. The writing in it is snappy and strong. The characters and the acting is great. The only beef that I have with Star Trek Into Darkness, and this is one beef, and I don't normally do this, except for the fact that it is such an egregious oversight that it pulls me out of the film every time. And that is, at the end of the movie, when they have and I can't remember the name of it right. Oh, the Dreadnought. They have their own Dreadnought, right? The big, black, militarized starship, okay? Peter Weller is piloting, who ends up being the bad guy. Spoiler alert. At the end of Into Darkness, that ship ends up just trashing the Enterprise to the point where it loses power and it begins to plummet to Earth. In the movie, that happens right next to the moon. Within a matter of seconds, they're not by the moon anymore. They're caught in the gravitational pull of Earth. That one, to me, I'm still completely lost on. I get the idea that this is cinema, and they can go and they can take leaps in logic. However, that one is a bit of a stretch. The visual of the Enterprise damaged next to the moon is spectacular, but suddenly either there's a time jump or their moon is way closer to the Earth than it's supposed to be. And they end up getting caught into the gravity of Earth. That part of it, I kind of go, huh. But it doesn't ruin the movie completely for me. And there are some incredibly epic sequences in that closing battle, especially when the Enterprise is seemingly doomed, falling to Earth, and they're able to get the engines re-engaged, and it comes out from under the clouds, and we get that hero shot of this battered and beaten and smoking on fire Enterprise above the clouds over Earth. It really, really is spectacular. So, look, if you haven't seen Star Trek Into Darkness, I can't recommend it enough, especially if you're a fan of space operas, which you got to be, or else why would you be listening to this show? It really is my favorite of the Star Trek films, of the newer film, and actually of all the Star Trek movies, to be honest with you. I'm a big fan of Wrath of Khan, but if I'm going to a desert island and I can only take one Star Trek movie, I'm taking Star Trek Into Darkness. One last point on this, which I just want to point out, and I'll probably bring it up on the Star Wars podcast this week, is that, isn't it interesting that here you have another franchise that does a bit of revamping of an intellectual property, an IP, in modern time. J.J. Abrams is involved. He also does 2 of these movies, not all 3. They get a separate director to do Star Trek Beyond. There is a definite sort of through line between Star Trek 2009 and Into Darkness that J.J. Abrams did, but when you get to Star Trek Beyond, it takes a bit of a deviation from the central storyline that we got in those first 2 films, and doesn't do anything with the plot elements set up in Into Darkness in Star Trek Beyond. And yet I didn't see any fandom freaking out over tinkering with the mythology or not having anybody follow a distinct trilogy through line or mapping it out prior. No, man, it seems like Trek fans just went and watched those movies and they either liked them or didn't. If only that same thing could possibly happen when it comes to the Star Wars franchise. But yes, I know, I'm asking for far, far too much.
My Nerd World.
I got a couple of emails, talkshownerd@gmail.com, that I want to share with you this week. I got another one from the Lowdown Show, Edwin Lowe, and he's just said, thanks for the recommendation of Trek Nation. It was good to see. Yeah, I really enjoyed that documentary. It's on HBO Max, and if you haven't checked it out, definitely go and do so. Friend of the show, Miranda, writes this: Titan AE, which we talked about on the last show, is an underrated gem. I agree. Let's Play a Game wrote this: my favorite space opera right now has got to be the TV show The 100 on the CW. I'm intrigued. The world building in this show is amazing. I've never seen it. If you haven't seen it, I haven't. You can binge the first 6 seasons on Netflix. Excellent. They're in their final season now, and here's the synopsis. Awesome, because I have no idea what it's about. When nuclear Armageddon destroys civilization on Earth, the only survivors are those on the 12 international space stations in orbit at the time. Wow, I'm already in. 3 generations later, the 4,000 survivors living on a space ark of linked stations see their resources dwindle and face draconian measures established to ensure humanity's future. Desperately looking for a solution, the Ark's leaders send 100 juvenile prisoners back to the planet to test its habitability. Having always lived in space, the exiles find the planet fascinating and terrifying. But with the fate of the human race in their hands, they must forge a path into the unknown. Dude, I'm in. Let's play a game. Thank you for recommending that. I had no idea that's what that show was about, and that sounds awesome. I'm actually going to put it on my watch list for this weekend. If you want to be a part of the show, email me, talkshownerd@gmail.com. And hopefully we have another show coming up again next week, because that wraps up this show. But before I let you go, I got a contest going on right now that you can enter for free, and there's no obligation to buy anything to win. Go to mynerdworld.net, click the link on the homepage, and join the mailing list. If you're already on the mailing list, you can go ahead and sign up anyways. I will still get you in the running. No spam or sharing of your information ever. The mailing list is simply for podcasts and information and details and exclusives when it comes to my EMBARK Space Opera series, and I only send out maybe 1 or 2 emails a month, okay? You'll get a little bit more when we're close to an EMBARK book release. We're still working on the 4th book, Gon Corbin and the Asteroid of Misfortune, an EMBARK adventure. That should be out in about a month or so. But if you go join the mailing list right now at mynerdworld.net, you'll be registered to win free EMBARK audiobooks narrated by the author, Jon Justice. Yes, that's me. So the grand prize is the complete EMBARK trilogy and audiobook. So that's Book 1, The Great Evacuation, Treasure in Darkness, and The Vanishing War. The second place prize, 4 winners are going to receive EMBARK's Book 1 and 2, The Great Evacuation and Treasure in Darkness, in audiobook. And third place, there'll be 5 winners. You'll all get EMBARK Book 1, The Great Evacuation, in audiobook. So again, simply enter your information in the form on the website at mynerdworld.net for your chance to win. The drawing is going to take place next Saturday on a Star Wars podcast. The listening is not required to win, and the winners will be emailed their free codes after the drawing. And remember, you can get the entire trilogy of EMBARK in ebook, paperback, and audiobook at Amazon.com, or just go to mynerdworld.net and hit the link right there on the homepage. And again, that's the way that you can support a space opera podcast or a Star Wars podcast. All the podcasts, actually, on My Nerd World. I don't do Patreon, at least for now. I'm not planning on doing that anytime in the near future either. But if you want to support the show, go pick up a copy of one or all of the EMBARK books. And right now, EMBARK Book 1 in ebook is just 99 cents, and books 2 and 3 are $4.99. You can get the paperbacks for $13.99, $11.99, and $12.99 for books 1, 2, and 3. And then if you don't win the audiobooks, if you don't register, but you want to get the audiobook, purchase of an ebook gets you a big discount on Audible on the audiobooks. And again, that's how you can go and support this podcast. And you're going to get hours of entertainment. Those audiobooks are long. The EMBARK Book 1, The Great Evacuation, I think is 12 hours long. And then we're looking at, I think, 9 and 10 for Treasure in Darkness and The Vanishing War. And all the details about the books, if you're not familiar, are also available there at mynerdworld.net. And one more quick shout out to this week's sponsor of the show, Zone. Go claim your Zone today. Again, it's a better all-in-one social media alternative that eliminates the need for the social media giants. With one profile, you can control and create multiple zones using different avatars to suit your online persona needs. Ourzone.zone, O-U-R zone.zone. Thank you so much for checking the show out this week. We'll be back again next week, and I look forward to hearing from you. Again, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com is the email address. Be safe, be healthy, and I'll talk to you again real soon. Bye.
My Nerd World.